We can also use the zero product property in factored form to solve modeling situations in mathematics. Here we have an arch to a train tunnel that is modeled by the equation y equals -5/16 times x plus 8 times x minus 8, where x and y are measured in feet. The x-axis represents the ground. So I'm just going to quickly so here's our x-axis, which is the ground. Find the width of the entrance at ground level. So we need to solve for our roots. We need to solve for x. Well, if x and y, so if x is the ground, that must mean y is the height. Well, what's the height of the ground? The height of the ground is 0, so we can write this equation as 0 equals -5/16 times x plus 8 times x minus 8. And to solve this using the zero product property, we're going to set any factor that could end up equaling or having a value of 0 equal to 0. So in this case, it would be x plus 8 could equal 0, and x minus 8 can equal 0. If x plus 8 equals 0, we subtract the 8, and we have x equals -8. If x minus 8 equals 0, we end up adding 8, and x equals +8. So that means we have our arch openings at -8 and +8 on the x-axis. What we need to find is what is this distance between them? Well, this is 8 feet, and this is also 8 feet. It's just going in the negative direction. So if I want the distance, remember, distance is just a difference between the largest value and the smallest value. I can say that it's going to be 8 subtract -8, and the distance is going to be 16 feet. Another example is being represented by a frog. So the height y of a jumping frog can be modeled by y equals -16x squared plus 4x, where x is the time in seconds since the frog jumped from the ground. Find the roots of the equation when y equals 0. Explain what the roots mean in this situation. Now, the reason they're saying when y equals 0 is because that's going to be the height of our frog when it's on the ground. So if we have 0 equals -16x squared plus 4x. Now, if we want to use the zero product property, we're going to need to factor out the greatest common monomial factor. And since our leading coefficient is negative, I'm going to factor out a negative value. 4 does go into 16 as well as 4, so I think it's safe to say we can factor out a -4 or divide both terms by a -4. And the greatest number of x's each term has in common is a single x. So I'm going to divide each of these terms in the original polynomial by -4x. So a -16 divided by -4 becomes a +4, and x squared divided by x becomes a +x. And if I'm going to divide a +4x by -4x, I'm actually going to end up with a negative value. And 4 divided by negative 4 becomes negative 1. So now I have my polynomial in factored form, and now I can set each factor equal to 0, because remember, each factor represents a value that could be 0, and solve. So when we have negative 4x equals 0, we'll divide by negative 4 and x equals 0. And for the other one, we would add 1. So 4x equals 1, divide by 4, and x equals 1/4. So explain what the roots mean in this situation. Well, if x is time in seconds, and y is the height, and we know y is 0, we know that at 0 seconds, the frog is on the ground. And it takes 1/4 second, or 1/4 of a second, for the frog to make one hop. So we can use the zero product property to help us solve mathematical modeling problems as well.